What happens when Hollywood royalty meets actual royalty on daytime television? When two worlds collide in the most public way possible, with millions watching as civility crumbles before our very eyes. It only took 42 seconds for one guest to completely destroy her reputation and get herself banned from television forever. This is the story of how Meghan Markle turned what should have been a friendly chat into the most explosive meltdown in talk show history. Drew Barrymore had been looking forward to this interview for weeks. Her team had worked tirelessly to secure the exclusive sit-down with the Duchess of Sussex. Drew's show was known for its warm, cozy atmosphere, where celebrities felt safe to open up about their personal lives. The studio was decorated with soft lighting and comfortable chairs, designed to make guests feel like they were chatting with an old friend in a living room. As the cameras rolled that Tuesday morning, Drew welcomed her audience with her signature bright smile. "Good morning, everyone. I am so excited about today's show because we have someone very special joining us. She's an actress, a humanitarian, a mother, and a duchess. Please give a warm welcome to Meghan Markle." The audience erupted in applause as Meghan walked onto the set. She was dressed in an elegant cream-colored blazer and matching pants, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun. She waved to the crowd with a practiced smile, but something seemed off about her demeanor. There was a tension in her shoulders, a slight edge to her expression that Drew immediately picked up on. "Meghan, thank you so much for being here," Drew said as they both settled into their chairs. "I have to say, you look absolutely stunning today." "Well, thank you, Drew," Meghan replied, her voice carrying a slight chill. "Though I have to say, I was expecting a bit more fanfare for my arrival. The green room was rather sparse, and I noticed there weren't any photographers outside to capture my entrance." Drew's smile faltered for just a moment. She had interviewed hundreds of celebrities over the years, and she knew when someone was setting a confrontational tone from the very beginning. But she pressed on, determined to keep the conversation light and positive. "Well, we like to keep things intimate here," Drew explained gently. "It's all about creating a safe space where we can have real conversations. Speaking of which, I'd love to talk about your new podcast and some of the amazing work you're doing." Meghan shifted in her chair, her expression growing more stern. "Actually, Drew, before we get into that, I think we need to address something. I was told this would be a serious interview, not some fluffy daytime chat show nonsense. I'm here to discuss important issues, not talk about my outfit or my feelings." The studio audience fell silent. You could hear a pin drop as the tension in the room became palpable. Drew's producers in the control booth began frantically whispering to each other, unsure of how to handle this unexpected hostility. Drew maintained her composure, though her voice took on a slightly firmer tone. "Of course, Meghan, we absolutely want to talk about the important work you're doing, but part of what makes this show special is that we get to see all sides of our guests. People want to connect with you as a person, not just as a public figure." "Connect with me?" Meghan's voice rose slightly. "Drew, I don't think you understand who you're dealing with here. I'm not some Hollywood starlet desperate for screen time. I'm a member of the British royal family. I've sat with world leaders, attended state dinners, and addressed the United Nations. This little chat show format is frankly beneath me." The audience gasped audibly. Drew's eyes widened in shock. In all her years of hosting, she had never encountered such blatant disrespect from a guest. But Drew Barrymore was a professional, and she had dealt with difficult personalities before. She took a deep breath and tried to steer the conversation back on track. "I completely respect your accomplishments, Meghan," Drew said calmly, "and that's exactly why our viewers are so excited to hear from you. You have such an incredible platform to make a difference in the world. Can you tell us about some of the causes that are closest to your heart?" Meghan leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Well, if you had done your homework, Drew, you would already know about my humanitarian work. But since you clearly haven't prepared properly for this interview, let me educate you. I've been fighting for women's rights since I was 11 years old. I've traveled to Rwanda. I've worked with the United Nations. I've championed gender equality on a global scale. Meanwhile, you've been making romantic comedies and hosting feel-good television shows." The insult hit Drew like a physical blow. The audience began to murmur uncomfortably. Drew's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass, but she maintained her professional demeanor. "Meghan, I think there might be some confusion here," Drew replied, her voice steady but clearly strained. "I've actually been involved in numerous charitable causes throughout my career. I've worked with feeding programs for children, supported literacy initiatives, and used my platform to raise awareness about mental health issues. But more importantly, I don't think we need to compare our accomplishments. We're both here to have a conversation." Meghan rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, please, Drew. Donating money to charity and showing up to galas is not the same as actual activism. I've sacrificed everything for my beliefs. I gave up my acting career. I left my family behind in America. I joined one of the most scrutinized families in the world, and I faced constant criticism from the British press. What have you sacrificed for your so-called causes? Drew felt her composure beginning to crack. The personal attacks were getting more vicious by the minute, and she could see her production team looking increasingly concerned from behind the cameras. But she was determined to salvage the interview somehow. "Meghan, I'm not sure why you're being so hostile," Drew said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I invited you here because I genuinely admire your work and thought our audience would love to get to know you better. But it seems like you have some anger that maybe we should talk about." That was the wrong thing to say. Meghan's face darkened, and her voice became ice cold. "Anger? You think I'm angry, Drew? Let me tell you what island anger is being silenced by an institution that claims to support you. Anger is watching the media tear apart your character while your own family does nothing to defend you. Anger is being invited onto shows like this one and being treated like some desperate celebrity looking for attention." The studio fell completely silent. Even the camera operators seemed frozen in place. Drew could feel tears beginning to well up in her eyes, but she blinked them back, determined not to give Meghan the satisfaction of seeing her break down on live television. "Meghan, I think you're projecting some of your own frustrations onto me," Drew said softly. "I've never treated you with anything but respect and admiration. In fact, I've defended you publicly when others have criticized you. I don't understand why you're attacking me personally when all I've tried to do is give you a platform to share your message." Meghan stood up abruptly from her chair, causing it to scrape loudly against the studio floor. The sound echoed through the silent studio like a gunshot. The scraping sound of the chair seemed to hang in the air forever. Meghan stood towering over Drew, her face flushed with rage, her perfectly manicured hands clenched into fists at her sides. The audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether they were witnessing a publicity stunt or a genuine mental breakdown happening in real time. "You want to know what my message is, Drew?" Meghan's voice was shaking with fury. "My message is that I don't have to sit here and be patronized by someone who has never faced real adversity in her entire privileged life. You grew up in Hollywood royalty, Drew. Your godfather was Steven Spielberg. You've never had to fight for anything." Drew remained seated, looking up at Meghan with a mixture of hurt and confusion. Her voice was barely audible when she responded. "Meghan, I think you have some misconceptions about my background. I actually had a very difficult childhood. My parents divorced when I was 9. I struggled with addiction as a teenager, and I've been open about my mental health challenges. I've never claimed to have all the answers, but I've tried to use my experiences to help others." Meghan let out a bitter laugh that sent chills through everyone in the studio. "Oh, please, poor little Drew Barrymore with her movie star problems. Do you know what it's like to be the most hated woman in Britain? Do you know what it's like to have your own family turn against you? Do you know what it's like to have racist trolls sending death threats to your unborn child?" The mention of racism caused a visible shift in the studio. Several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Drew's producers were frantically gesturing from behind the cameras, trying to signal whether the show should continue or cut to commercial. But Drew knew that stopping now would only make things worse. "Meghan, I can't imagine how difficult those experiences have been for you," Drew said gently, trying to de-escalate the situation. "But taking your pain out on me isn't going to solve anything. I'm on your side here. I've always been supportive of you in the media." "Supportive?" Meghan's voice cracked with incredulity. "You call this supportive? Bringing me on your little morning show and expecting me to smile and giggle about my favorite recipes, or what it's like to be a mom? I'm trying to change the world, Drew, and you're treating me like I'm here to promote a romantic comedy." Drew felt her patience finally beginning to wear thin. She had tried everything she could think of to salvage this interview, but Meghan seemed determined to turn it into a confrontation. For the first time since the interview began, Drew's voice took on a slightly sharper edge. "Meghan, I invited you here to talk about whatever you wanted to discuss. You're the one who's been attacking me personally from the moment you sat down. I've asked you multiple times about your humanitarian work, your podcast, your causes, but instead you've chosen to spend our time together criticizing me and my show." Meghan began pacing back and forth behind her chair like a caged animal. Her composed Duchess facade had completely crumbled, revealing someone who seemed to be spiraling out of control. "You don't get it, do you, Drew? You live in this bubble of positivity and rainbows where everyone loves you and thinks you're so genuine and authentic. But some of us live in the real world, where we face actual consequences for speaking our truth." "What truth are you speaking right now, Meghan?" Drew asked, her voice growing stronger. "Because all I'm hearing is someone who seems very angry and is taking it out on someone who invited her here as a friend." Meghan whirled around to face Drew directly, her eyes blazing. "You want to know the truth? The truth is that people like you make me sick. You pretend to care about important issues, but when it comes down to it, you're just another privileged white woman who thinks she understands struggle because she went to rehab when she was a teenager." The racist undertone of the comment hit the studio like a bomb. Gasps erupted from the audience. Drew's mouth fell open in shock. Even the camera crew seemed stunned by the viciousness of the attack. This had crossed a line that no one in the studio was prepared for. Drew stood up slowly from her chair, her hands shaking slightly but her voice steady and clear. "Meghan, I think you need to stop and think about what you're saying. You're hurting people with your words right now, including yourself. This anger you're carrying is eating you alive, and I genuinely feel sorry for you." "Don't you dare pity me!" Meghan screamed, her voice echoing through the studio. "I don't need sympathy from someone who has never had to fight for respect, never had to prove herself, never had to deal with the kind of scrutiny and hatred that I face every single day. You have no idea what it's like to be me." Drew took a deep breath and looked directly into Meghan's eyes. When she spoke, her voice was calm but firm, filled with a strength that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. "You're absolutely right, Meghan. I have no idea what it's like to be you. But I do know what it's like to be hurt, to feel misunderstood, to struggle with mental health, and to make mistakes in public. What I don't understand is why you're choosing to handle your pain by trying to tear down other people." Meghan's face contorted with rage. She grabbed her purse from beside the chair and clutched it against her chest like a shield. "I don't have to listen to this from you. I don't have to sit here and be lectured by someone who thinks 15 minutes of childhood trauma makes her qualified to give life advice." "Nobody's lecturing you, Meghan," Drew replied quietly. "I'm just trying to understand why you're so determined to make this personal when all I wanted was to have a conversation about the things you care about." Meghan began backing toward the edge of the set, her voice rising to a near shriek. "You want to know what I care about? I care about not being dismissed and minimized by people who think they're better than me. I care about not being reduced to some tabloid storyline for your audience's entertainment. I care about being treated with the respect that my position demands." The entitlement in her voice was now so thick you could cut it with a knife. Drew realized that this wasn't just anger or pain talking anymore. This was someone who genuinely believed that the world owed her something, that her titles and status put her above basic human decency. "Meghan," Drew said softly, "respect is something you earn through your actions, not something that comes automatically with a title. And right now, the way you're acting is making it very hard for anyone in this room to respect you." That was the final straw. Meghan's eyes filled with tears of fury, and her voice became a strangled whisper that was somehow more frightening than her screaming had been. "How dare you? How dare you speak to me that way? Do you know who I am? Do you know what I've given up? Do you know what I've sacrificed?" Drew looked at her with genuine sadness in her eyes. "I know who you used to be, Meghan, and I'm starting to understand who you've become, and it breaks my heart." Meghan's face went completely white. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold onto her purse. The studio was so quiet that you could hear the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next, sensing that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. "I'm done," Meghan whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm done with this circus." The whispered words, "I'm done with this circus," hung in the air like a death sentence. But instead of leaving, Meghan stood frozen at the edge of the set, her chest heaving with barely controlled rage. The studio lights seemed to flicker, as if responding to the electric tension that filled every corner of the room. What happened next would become the most shocking moment in daytime television history. Drew took a step toward her, extending her hand in one final attempt at reconciliation. "Meghan, please, let's just take a breath here. We can start over if you want. We can talk about whatever you'd like to discuss." Meghan's head snapped up, and when she looked at Drew, her eyes were completely wild. Gone was any pretense of royal composure or duchess dignity. What remained was pure, unfiltered fury that seemed to consume her entire being. "Start over?" Meghan's voice was now a horrifying mixture of laughter and screaming. "You think we can just start over? You think you can humiliate me on national television and then pretend it never happened? You think you can psychoanalyze me like I'm one of your broken Hollywood friends looking for a shoulder to cry on?" Drew's hand fell to her side. She could see that there was no reasoning with Meghan anymore. Whatever had been building inside the Duchess for months or years had finally exploded. and Drew just happened to be standing in the blast radius. "I never tried to humiliate you, Meghan," Drew said quietly. "Everything that's happened here today has been your choice. I've done nothing but try to treat you with kindness and respect." Meghan threw her head back and let out a sound that was barely human. It was part sob, part scream, part maniacal laughter. The audience recoiled as if they'd been physically struck. Several people in the front row actually stood up and began moving toward the exit. "Kindness? Respect?" Meghan shrieked. "You call this respect? Bringing me on your pathetic little show and expecting me to perform like a trained monkey? Do you know who I am? I am the Duchess of Sussex. I am married to a prince. I have had tea with the Queen of England." Drew felt something inside her finally snap. She had endured personal attacks, racist comments, and complete disrespect for the past 20 minutes. Her staff was traumatized, her audience was frightened, and her show was being destroyed by someone who seemed to have completely lost touch with reality. "Meghan," Drew said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a knife, "I don't care if you're married to the Pope. The way you're acting right now is completely unacceptable, and I'm not going to stand here and let you abuse me or my staff any longer." The words hit Meghan like a physical blow. Her mouth opened and closed several times before any sound came out. When she finally spoke, her voice was so low and menacing that it sent chills through everyone who heard it. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career, Drew Barrymore. Do you have any idea what I can do to you? Do you know the kind of connections I have? I can destroy you with a single phone call. I can make sure you never work in this industry again." The threat was so over the top, so completely delusional, that several audience members actually started laughing nervously. Drew looked at Meghan with something that might have been pity if it weren't mixed with complete disgust. "Are you threatening me, Meghan?" Drew asked calmly. "On live television, in front of hundreds of witnesses? Because if you are, I think we need to end this conversation right now." Meghan's face turned purple with rage. She began pointing at Drew with a shaking finger, her voice rising to a pitch that was almost painful to listen to. "You have no idea what you've done. No idea. I came here to do you a favor, to give your little show some credibility, and this is how you repay me? By trying to make me look crazy?" "Meghan," Drew said with devastating clarity, "I haven't made you look like anything. You've done that all by yourself." That was it. The final insult that broke whatever was left of Meghan's self-control. She lunged toward Drew with her purse raised above her head like a weapon. The audience screamed. Drew's security team came rushing onto the set from 3 different directions. Camera operators dove out of the way as chaos erupted throughout the studio. "You bitch!" Meghan screamed as 2 security guards grabbed her arms. "You absolute bitch! How dare you? How dare you speak to me like that? I am royalty! I am royalty!" Drew stood perfectly still in the center of the storm, watching as the woman she had tried so hard to help was restrained by security. Tears were streaming down Meghan's face, but they seemed to be tears of rage rather than sadness. She was still screaming obscenities and threats as the guards began escorting her toward the exit. "Get your hands off me," Meghan shrieked, struggling against the security guards. "Do you know who I am? I will have you all fired. I will sue this network. I will sue Drew. I will sue everyone." The audience sat in stunned silence as they watched a member of the British royal family being physically removed from a daytime talk show while screaming like a person having a complete mental breakdown. Cell phones appeared throughout the audience as people began recording the unprecedented scene. Drew finally moved, walking slowly to the center of the set where her chair waited. She sat down carefully, smoothed her skirt, and looked directly into the camera. When she spoke, her voice was steady and professional, though you could see the emotional toll the experience had taken on her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Drew said quietly, "I want to apologize to our studio audience and our viewers at home for what you just witnessed. That is not the kind of conversation we ever want to have on this show. And it's certainly not how we like to treat our guests, no matter how they choose to treat us." In the background, Meghan's voice could still be heard echoing through the hallways as security escorted her out of the building. "This isn't over. This isn't over. You'll be hearing from my lawyers. All of you. I'll destroy this show. I'll destroy all of you." Drew waited for the shouting to fade before continuing. "I want our viewers to know that we invited Meghan here today because we genuinely admired her work and wanted to give her a platform to discuss the causes she cares about. What happened instead was unfortunate for everyone involved, but especially for her. I hope she gets the help she clearly needs." The studio doors slammed shut with a sound that seemed to echo forever. In the sudden quiet that followed, Drew looked out at her traumatized audience and gave them the same warm, genuine smile that had made her beloved by millions of viewers around the world. "Well," she said with a slight laugh that broke the tension, I think we can all agree that was not how I planned to spend my Tuesday morning. When we come back after the break, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation with Chef Marcus Samuelsson about his new cookbook and his amazing work feeding families in need. I think we could all use some positivity after what we just experienced. As the show cut to commercial, Drew remained in her chair, taking deep breaths and processing what had just happened. Her producers rushed onto the set to check on her, but she waved them away with a tired smile. She had survived one of the most brutal verbal attacks in television history, and she had done it with grace, dignity, and strength. The Duchess of Sussex had entered the studio that morning, expecting to be treated like royalty. Instead, she had revealed herself to be something far less impressive, and in trying to destroy Drew Barrymore, she had only succeeded in destroying herself.